Well, good afternoon, everyone. Before I start the formalities, I will just say when you hear yourself described like that, you think they're talking about somebody other than yourself, but I'm very flattered. So, to the Chancellor, Judge Lexampati, Professor Cesar Mabizela, to Judge Gerald Bloom, the Chairperson of Council, and to the public orator, who, as I say, put something together that I've never heard before, so I'm very grateful. But to all the deans here, to members of the University Council, to the academics and the administration support staff, to the SRC members, including the president of the SRC, Avaxeni Tiala, to all the graduates and your families, and to my family, who are here and they're also online, students, university, and friends. Well, it is indeed, truly a huge honor for me to be awarded a Doctor of Laws by Rhodes University. And I want to really sincerely thank those who nominated me and all the university structures that then subsequently approved this award. But this today is much more about the young people here who are receiving your awards. And what I would like to do, because I didn't think you did such a good job for the Vice-Chancellor, I think you should give yourselves another big round of applause. So I think, like the other graduates I suspect have said, when you're asked to talk to a large audience, particularly of young people, you sit back and you say, what am I going to talk about? So I did what any person of my age would do addressing younger people, and I looked to a new artificial intelligence tool called ChatGPT. Hands up those of you who know about ChatGPT. I think it came out after you got your degrees, but it's, for those who don't know what it is, it's a software tool, it's artificial intelligence, and it's scarily effective. It was launched this year in January, and within 2 months, it's got over 100 million users. And what you have to do to it is you have to say, ChatGPT, please write me, I know none of you did this, write me an essay on, and it does it for you. You just specify. So I said to ChatGPT, I thought, well, this would be interesting. So I said, can you write me an acceptance speech for Rhodes University as a doctor of medicine who's receiving a Doctor of Laws? But I realized then two things. I hadn't thought about this. First of all, when I read it, it was actually really boring. And secondly, it did occur to me that you've had 5 honorary doctorates awarded this week, and I thought, well, if Chief Justice Zondo also went on to ChatGPT, we could give you the same speech. So I scrapped that. And I decided that instead, I would tell you some stories and just sort of life lessons that I think I've learned, and picking up on what you've just heard. And although I'm from medicine, you all are from different backgrounds, disciplines today, and you're at different points in your chosen careers. But thinking about talking to you, I went back to a memory I had, which was just referred to, when I first addressed a large audience of medical students and doctors. And it was a very different time. It was 1986, and we had just had the announcement of a state of emergency in South Africa. And the state of emergency, for those of you who remember this, was in response to really uprisings, particularly in the townships where youth and the army were clashing, where youth were disappearing, and there were many deaths. Now, at that time, I was working in Alexandra Township Clinic, and I was very pregnant. And that's an important point when I tell you this story. And there were not very many doctors, as you can imagine, a population of 500,000. We got NGO funding. The government wasn't interested in funding. There were few doctors. And what was called the Alex 6-Day War broke out. And on that first day, there were just, in fact, I think I was probably the only doctor that was there at that time. And the military came in and they took away the youth who were hiding in the clinic. And they were injured youth, and they just took them away. So that night, a group of us from what was called the National Medical and Dental Association, NAMDA, sat all night and we wrote a memorandum that was a guideline. And that guideline said, what are the responsibilities of healthcare workers in times of conflict? And the next day, I went back into the clinic and the war was going on. It was a 6-day war. And once again, youths were injured and they came to the clinic and they hid. And we were trying to both hide them and care for them. And what I remember was standing in the entrance to the emergency part of the clinic with my NAMDA guideline in one hand and a big plastic green apron over my pregnant stomach in the other, and saying, "I will not let you in," being with a very, very, very large colonel standing above me, saying, "I will not let you in." Now, remember, we were surrounded by Caspers, that we were surrounded by soldiers, and as you can guess, that strategy wasn't going to be very successful. So I was taken away from the doorway, and I was taken to a Casper, and shouted very loudly that if they put me in that Casper, I would give birth. And I think that was what saved me, because they let me go because I was too noisy and too pregnant, but the youth were removed again. And I think that was a profound moment for me, because it meant that being a doctor wasn't just about the clinical care. It meant that being a doctor meant that you had to care holistically for the needs of the people that you cared for. And I went back, and this is what I remembered. I went back and talked at Wits Medical School about what our responsibilities were as healthcare workers in times of conflict. So why am I telling you this? Well, many of you, I think you're from commerce, you're going to go into commerce, there's journalism. You've got a range of different skills that you're going to go into. But a job is a job. A job is what you can get paid for, and it's an occupation. But I want you to think about what is a vocation. A vocation is that occupation, but it's something that you feel, and perhaps others feel, is worthy. So when you think about what you're going to do, think about what you want to do in terms of worthiness and dedication. You're a long time in a job. And importantly, one of the things to remember in all of this, and it's a very good TED talk for those of you who like to listen to podcasts, it's not what you do, it's why you do it. And many of you will go into business, you'll be entrepreneurs, you're going to be perhaps in NGOs, in the public sector, and in the private sector. But whatever you do, think about, why am I doing this? I can get up, I can go to work, I can come home. Why am I doing this? And I want to pick up on what the Vice-Chancellor just said. I would really argue today in South Africa that the why should not be fast cars, fancy houses. How can I make big profits on essential goods during a pandemic? That is not a why. That's corruption. Your whys should be different, because without that, we can't build a society. So it's not what you do, it's why you do it, and I want you to think about that. And for the healthcare workers working during that 6-day war, the why was about caring. It wasn't just about stitching up wounds and taking out bullets, it was about caring. So just thinking on from the story that you've just heard about other pieces of things I've learned, really. And you've heard that in 1994, I was asked to set up a research unit because we had a democratic country for the first time, and the history of research and health research in South Africa had been very much targeting, it was heart transplants. It was extraordinarily effective, high-tech medicine targeting rich communities and white communities, and we had completely neglected the majority of our communities. So I was very interested in women's health. I drafted what was to become the women's health policy for the new government. And I was asked to set up a research entity, and we had 5 people, and I had no experience of research at all. But I did it, and it's grown. And the reason it's grown is not because of me, it's grown because of the commitment of an entire team of people. So from that, I would say sometimes things are offered to you that don't necessarily immediately resonate with you. They're not necessarily things you feel confident. You've heard of the imposter syndrome? You're asked to do things, and you said, it can't be me, I'm not good enough, I can't do that. It's not true. Take that risk and do it. And now I'm going to come on to another part that relates very strongly to the work that goes on at Rhodes, not so much for yourselves, but you all know that you have a very strong school here of pharmacology and a very strong school of law. And this was the other thing that happened to me, where you see my life is a lot of things. People ask me to do things that I'm not terribly well equipped to do. And in 1997, I was asked to join the Medicines Control Council. And I didn't know much about drug regulation at all, but it was post-94, and we were rebuilding structures. So I joined it, and then the next year, the health minister asked me to become the chair of that council. And again, I felt, I don't know enough about this. And when she phoned me, I did what any sensible person would do, is that I said to my husband, who's sitting here, tell her I'm not here, and I hid behind a pillar so that she wouldn't be able to see me on the telephone, but I didn't get away with it, and I was made the chair of the Medicines Control Council, and now, as you've heard, I'm the chair of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. And you'll also be very glad to hear I know a lot more about drug regulation now than I did then. But I think importantly here, if you get offered things, don't be afraid to take it. The Vice-Chancellor said the same thing. Don't be afraid of failure. If you've been offered it, someone has seen something in you that you haven't necessarily seen in yourself. So be brave and take that opportunity. But the other thing I want to do is to link my honorary doctorate today with that have been given to other colleagues this week. And that is to say that we sometimes don't think about how important regulators are in a democratic society. And it's something I've more and more got to understand. Now, drug regulation is a combination of the legal and the pharmacological and the medical. Why is it important? It's important because if we don't have it, when you go into a pharmacy and you buy a product, you will have no idea whether that product is safe or not. When you have an anesthetic, you won't know what is being given to you and if it's safe or not. And this is a real risk in today's world. We've heard about cough medicines made in India killing children around the world because of lack of good regulation. So regulation is there to be independent, like the judiciary, and to make sure that what we are giving in terms of a most important pillar of health, pharmacology, that what we are giving to people is safe and it's effective, and you can feel confident that when your child is sick, the medicines they get are good and they're going to work. And the reason I want to emphasize that is that I think it's a branch of democracy that's sometimes not recognized. If you have decent regulation, if you have independent regulation, you should not have corruption. You should not have people being able to bend the rules and give you substandard service, whether it's on trains or anywhere else. That should not happen. So I want to just also to your colleagues and to yourself, some of you might well go into the pharmaceutical industry. Just think about that actually regulators you can think of them that they're a real pain, but they're incredibly important. So as you can see from what you've heard and what I've said, I sort of had this funny career where I was an activist and a doctor, and then a sort of very ill-prepared drug regulator, and then an ill-prepared researcher, and I did a bit of this and that. And so what I want to say to you, because there are many millennials here, and it's a different world, you're not like your parents, is that your life's course can be bending. It's not always a straight line. It can go this way and it can go that way. But the important thing for all of you is to take those opportunities, take those risks. It's a Latin expression, carpe diem, which means seize the day, seize the day. So don't be afraid to take those risks, and don't be afraid if your life course is not a straight line, but you're doing some of this and you're experimenting with that. But do it because it's not what you do, it's why you do it, and think about why you are doing it. So, I'm going to go now back to ChatGPT, because I also thought it was too dry. I told you the first speech was too dry. So I said, can you give me a joke? Because, every speech like this has to have a joke. Right? And they gave me a joke. So I'm going to test it on you. And your response is going to be very important, because I'll either use ChatGPT for jokes again, or I will never use it again. So here it goes. Right. Behind every doctor of medicine who receives a doctor of laws stands several astonished lawyers. Okay, so all of you, we can use it for jokes sometimes. But anyways, thanks. So once again, I'm so impressed. I've had an opportunity to talk to the faculty, to your senior leaders here today, and I'm so impressed with Rhodes University, and I'm totally honored to have been given this degree. But the most important thing about what I've said is for all of you young people who are getting your degrees today. Think about the opportunities, seize the day, think why you do it, not what you do, why. And just remember that there are 7 days in the week, and not one of them is called someday. Thank you.